Hi, welcome. Thanks for your patience. Um,
We had to make tea.
it was a must. Thanks for being here tonight. Welcome to How to Rock the First Date. We're going to give you some insights, some tools, some perspectives that will hopefully help you enjoy first dates more, whether it's somebody you can communicate this information to or whether it's yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that kind of kicks it off with the first part of this, talking about communication being key, even walking into a first date. Even though a lot of times when people are telling you information about how to connect with someone, it has to do with communication, and that usually comes up way down the line. But one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight is how to establish the base of communication with someone you'd like to connect with. So that's a great segue.
And really, if you're just to reinforce this, I think I posted this, but if you're looking to smash, we're not your people to learn from. We're real people with grounded distinctions, hoping to help you really create deep, intimate connections. Now, duration doesn't have anything to do with quality of connection, so I don't necessarily want to say that it has to be some sort of long-term thing. But the thing to remember, and we're going to introduce ourselves, I think.
Yeah.
And then we're each going to tell a dating story. But the thing I want you to remember before we do that is that communication skills are physical skills. So they always take practice. They always feel a little bit awkward. It's like any other physical skill you learn. And for some reason, in my experience with workshops, especially around communication, interpersonal communication, people have this bizarre standard for themselves that they should like learn the thing and then do it automatically, when it really is a physical skill. So it's going to feel awkward at first. It's going to take practice. You might skin a knee, like that. So even in writing, it's a practice.
Yep.
And then, of course, this is all in support of a conference we're doing in November, and we'll talk a little bit about it at the end. But for the most part, we just want to deliver solid value to you.
So I'll start. I'm Lily VonTrapp. I've been in a public space for almost 10 years at this point. I do performance art. I do modeling. I think more in line with this conversation that we're having tonight, I've been working on finding and working with partners for 20 years at this point. And so I've done a lot of work working on the internal aspects of how I process dating and process relationships, as well as the external recognition that we're all different and we come from different backgrounds, and sometimes that can be hard to reconcile. And so that's kind of a little bit of my background. I'm a performer and just a lover, despite what it might look like at times. So yes, that is me. I'm glad you're all here. It's nice to see you.
I'm Jason McClain. I've been I've been engaged in my own conscious personal development for 30 years, and am a romantic first. We were just joking about, we're each going to tell a dating story, and mine is my $700 first date story that completely just it was going amazing up to a certain point, and then it was like it's like the Hindenburg went down.
Save
suddenly.
The drama for the story. Come on, don't give it away.
But I've been an evolutionary guide doing advanced workshops and one-on-one work with people for 15 years full time now. I'm currently writing a book on evolutionary relationships. I've helped over 500 clients through one-on-one programs, 6-month one-on-one programs. And I've just decided to turn, I've always resisted stuff around relationships. Like I didn't want the responsibility. Part of it, people always do inexplicable things. You go, well, here's how you can get what you want. And then they do the opposite, and you go, well, what's going on there? And I had never been in a relationship where that was the case until a couple of years ago. So now that I've had that experience, I feel like, all right. And really, everything I've been doing, my entire life has really been about love of the feminine, and I am certainly a romantic, a poet first, if you were to press me on it. So, oh, and also one more. Lily and I are not dating, and we are not lovers. We should just get that out of the way. We're both single. A lot of people might assume that we are. The more we talked, she approached me about perhaps doing something like this. And the more we talked, the more we just seemed completely aligned. But we are not in a relationship, just to get that out of the way. We're not one of those couples who are like, oh, you can have what we want. We're just people who have looked at mistakes we've made, put structures in place, and have a very similar framework that doesn't. We want to give people a modern framework to approach dating in this postmodern age where there really are no. We know what doesn't work. We've sort of trashed the past, but there is no framework to navigate modern dating really in a way that's individual to the person that you're relating with.
And also translatable to the broader spectrum of humans that you're trying to meet, which is one of the things that's missing and why we want to do this together, is that we used to, as a culture, have a landscape of this is how you date and this is what you do. And we've shed that for good reasons, like a snake shedding its skin. We didn't need it anymore. It wasn't serving us. We let go of it. But one of the pieces of feedback that I've gotten a number of times, and I don't know how all of you navigate this, but one of the things that I've experienced is that basically I meet someone and they're interested and they try to communicate that to me, and at some point they just kind of throw their hands up in the air and they're like, I literally have no idea what to say or do right now. So if you could just tell me, that would be great. And I find that problematic for a number of reasons, which is part of what drove me to reach out to Jason and say, I think that you and I together could help people find a landscape that is amenable to all of us. And we can work together to help people get to a point where it's like, here's this weird thing I'm trying to do. There's a better way than just flailing around in the Tinder universe and trying to just snag people as you happen to encounter them. Because I feel fairly confident saying that all of us have been there and none of us have really succeeded in that space. So it's like, okay, how do we make this better for everybody?
I'm trying to get our outline up on my phone, by the way, is why I'm looking down at my phone. And my screen keeps timing out. I have the outline up, the screen times out. So
that's not important. What's important is I'll jump in and I'll share one of my favorite dating stories. So there was a boy, and I'm using that term intentionally. There was a boy, same age, still a boy. I didn't find out until later, but he popped up, and it wasn't Tinder. He found me on Facebook, which is also another very reliable place to find partners. But he pops up, and he pops into my DMs, and he's like, hey, girl. I was like, cool, this is going to be high-level intellectual conversation, but I have some extra bandwidth. So yeah, bring it. All right. Hey, what's going on? So he actually kind of tripped and fell into actually being a charming person, as far as I could tell on the internet. And
she's the sack.
But he said nice things, and he complimented things about me I like to be complimented on, which is another thing that we'll touch on later on, is how to actually communicate with somebody that you're interested in. But he said nice things to me, and he was like, you're different, and I'm fascinated by you. And he threw a couple of red flags in, and I should have caught them as they were coming in, and I didn't. I just was like, nope, that's not happening. So it's going to be just over my head. I'm going to pretend like that didn't happen. And one of them was, you're different. You're not like other women. And I was like, aren't I though? I can engage with you in a way I can't talk to other people. This is just, I feel this connection. And I gave into it, because even though I can see what's wrong, sometimes I'm also an idiot because I haven't gotten laid in a while. And we can just be really honest about that. My vagina makes me an idiot when it's not fed, kind of like the Audrey too. So I just let him go. Yes, all right, fine. Yes, all right, fine. So we finally get to a point where both of us have mutual time in our schedule. And it's like, let's spend time together. And he just went in I mean, Jill committed. He committed, and he was like, "Girl, you got time. Like, I'ma just plan to spend the whole night with you. Like, I will say goodbye to you the next morning." And I was like, "Okay, that's we'll come back. Oh, okay." But we meet up, and we have this cute little date, and he shows up, and he's made no effort in his appearance, and is kind of sloppy and but very passionate. He's sloppy but passionate. And again, I think all of us have been in that place where we find that person who's sloppy but passionate, and our limbic system says, "No, it's fine. This is fine. It's fine. Look at that fire in his eyes and his loins." So we spend time together, and by the end of our date in that evening, he's saying things, just extending the kind of craziness that he had brought to me in the first place. "I'm just fascinated by you. You're so beautiful. I just want to spend time with you. Can I be part of your life? I want to wife you." And I swear to God, he said that. First 4 hours of being in the same space to me, he just drops, "I want to wife you." And had this intensity. And part of me was like, oh, that's okay. These are the stories I've read about. I feel like this is very special. Okay. So we kind of let it go, and we had these intense conversations. And ultimately I was like, cool, I got shit to do. So you got to get the fuck out. Like I got stuff to do. And so we separate, and it feels like there's this magnetism between us, and we just like pull away from it. And it was not a comfortable moment, but and so part of my little dark heart was like, oh, maybe he's the one. Maybe that's what this is supposed to feel like. And I was kind of Twitter pated, and I was like, okay, all right. I swear to God, I have not heard from him since. He left my house. I have not heard a fucking word from him since he left. And at one point, I even popped up and I was like, so remember that whole like, you want to wife me thing? I just need clarity. It's been a week and I just want to like touch base on it. Nothing. I have not heard from this human since. So that was one of my favorite dates, where somebody was like elbow deep into my heart and then left and just like was like, sorry, I forgot the lube. I gotta go, bye. And just like left, and I've never heard from him since. It was really romantic.
I don't know how to do an authentic, so that whole story is bizarre to me.
It was a trip.
I have two, and one's super short, like 30 seconds, to go along with that, really. Mm-hmm. Except the opposite. If somebody says that you're too good for them, believe them. I fell in love with this woman in like 3 weeks, and I'm like, oh my God, you're the woman I always wanted but thought I could never find. And she said, you're the man I always wanted but thought I could never have. And I went, nah.
Wait, what?
And so I ignored that for about 4 years, trying to, make the thing work. So trust yourself is really trust yourself.
Your gut knows more than you think it does.
And I'm going to skip the second story, really.
That's kind of it in a nutshell.
Well, no, the other one was like, we had talked for a month. We knew similar people. She was also an NLP master practitioner. She lives, way far away. So we talked for about a month before she came up. She came up, and I've never spent so much on a date and had it. Actually, I've never had a date go so tragically. I've also never spent so much, which I understand why. Like now I'm like, let's meet for coffee, or I'll make, I'll cook you lunch or something, like just to get a sense of where you are. It's a little easier now with this was 8 years ago. It's a little easier now with the ubiquity of video and stuff. Like we talked on the phone. And the date was going incredibly well, and until it wasn't. And so just the fantasy that I had built up in my head for a month, without actually having any real interaction with the human, and seeing how they acted in public and saw how they were with other people, and I think is really important. But getting to the meat of what we're supposed to talk about today,
No, I think that's the perfect segue because I think this takes us straight into what we need to do before the first date. And I think one of the first things that's really important to point out is like you can have a really profound seeming connection with someone, but until you meet them in person, until you bridge that gap of time where it's like, hey, I want to know you. This is very tempting for me to just fall into because that's where we lose ourselves with our preconceived expectations of what we want versus how the other person can cater to that. It's really important that one of the things you need to do before the first date is make sure you set a time frame to connect in person as quickly as possible so nobody falls into that gap of preconceived expectation versus whatever is actually available to the two of you.
Thank you. Yeah, get a reality check right away, basically.
Yep.
It's so difficult right now. Like there's this woman I'm talking about dating. She's in Canada, can't come here. We've been talking for like 3 months. Seems amazing. We're both having all these feelings, and it's like, but we're both really upfront about, and we haven't met. We could meet, and it could be a disaster. Mm-hmm. And we keep reminding ourselves of that. And so it's a tricky. Right now it's tricky. Yeah. But in general, yeah, the quicker you can actually have a connection. But speaking of I've seen a lot of female dating coaches say if a man wants to have a cheap first date, it means it means all these things that it doesn't necessarily mean. Mm-hmm. I can't stand that stuff because they're just projecting a bunch of stuff onto it could be any number of reasons. I'm just trying to sort out the crazy. Like a low commitment. Let's just make sure, it's not some sort of game. It's like, I just don't want to live into delusion. Anyway. So
that's really important because I think what we need to understand is that historically, as our culture is understood, like the first date is supposed to be where you make the biggest impression, the most profound connection. And while a lot of times that can be true, it's also super important to give you and this potential partner that you run into space to have like a pre-date, like let's go get coffee, let me make you lunch. And right. So it's like the impression isn't going to be any less, but the pressure of sweeping you off of your feet or having yourself swept off of your feet is something that we kind of need to tone down. And that's one of, again, this is about how to rock the first date. And a lot of that is walking in with the accurate expectations of what to expect. And so it's like, what should be expected in that time is that the two of you connect, not that there's this huge sweeping romantic gesture that one or all of you should be expecting, because that's going to put so much pressure. And especially again in this day and age where most of us are meeting digitally, very few people meet at the grocery store and like bump into this human and they're like, oh, you're buying pineapple, I'm buying pineapple, we should go on a date. Like that doesn't really happen anymore. So you need to have that first time where you can allow yourselves to explore your connection without these huge, powerful expectations of what should happen.
And I just like to set the expectation that there's no expectations. And also that we both have the freedom to unplug at any moment, meaning hey, this isn't working for me, this just doesn't seem like a fit. And just, make sure that they feel safe enough to, especially from as a man, I want the woman to know that I have, there's no obligation, there's no weird awkwardness. I don't have any expectations. We might meet and we might just say, well, it was a pleasure meeting you. And I just say all of that to make sure that, and I very rarely, I usually have I don't have sex before the third date rule. Again, the pandemic's odd around that kind of stuff, but I like to set that frame in advance, hey, just so you know, so that they realize that, not that I want to take sex off the table, but I've never been disappointed because I waited. It's never been I've certainly had sex too soon in my life, but waiting for it hasn't been a problem. It's, you might stumble into some crazy if you do it too soon.
Well, and just show of hands, how many of you have been on the first date and it's been something that you felt some sort of obligation afterward that you weren't necessarily comfortable with and didn't necessarily want to actually follow through on, but the pressure was there? because I know I've been there. I know I've definitely had times where I'm like, yeah, all right, we'll fuck in the back of my Subaru because just I need to get you, just get out. So like, also maybe make sure I've cleaned my Subaru if you ever need a ride. Throwing that out there. Man. But it's nice to have somebody, like it's nice to have that discussion about expectations before you go on a date, where it's like, we're going to connect, we might not connect. There might be a moment where I just show up to the table and I look at you and I make eye contact and I just start screaming and run away. And maybe it's you, maybe it's me. Maybe we have a really great time together and we get to build this whole beautiful relationship together and the rest is history. But it's like, we need to, like, setting the expectation that anywhere from like laying eyes on you and screaming and running away to building the rest of our lives together is an acceptable paradigm, and we're all comfortable with whatever happens in between as long as there's proper communication.
So, before, during, and end of date and post date. So, before the date, still, like, I like to elicit preferences, but not, so asking them what kind of food she likes is different than saying, where would you like to go? And having her make all the decisions. So getting like, what kind of foods do you like? And it also shows that you actually care about her preferences. Like I always ask if they have any allergies, or there's nothing worse than being like, let me surprise you with sushi and she's allergic to, I don't know, whatever.
Or I want to impress you, so I'm taking you to a steakhouse. Oh, I'm sorry, you're vegan? Wait, what?
Right. And so and even further along, like what kind of experiences do you want to have? Not what would you like to do, but like, what, like, do you like fun? Do you like adventure? Well, then maybe, the surprise would be a hot air balloon ride. If you're far enough along to feel like that, which would be pretty deep in for me at this point, but it's not out of the question, right? But if she's like, well, I like the outdoors, well, then hot air balloon ride is probably, in a basket floating. That's not exactly probably what she means. Whatever. But just so elicit preferences, qualities, characteristics, types of things she likes, rather than what she wants to do or what kind of things she wants to do. Because then she's going to feel like she has to plan it, and then,
Well, and
that's the sound of a pussy drying up, by the way.
One of the really nice things about that as well is that a lot of times some of the complaints that women hear from men in their lives, I'm going with that language, but I don't necessarily mean it as gendered, but a lot of times partners say, well, I constantly ask my partner what they want and they won't tell me. And it's like, maybe you're asking the wrong questions. Maybe it shouldn't be, well, where do you want to eat tonight? It should be more along the lines of, what would you like to do? How would you, like, what experience would you like out of tonight? Do you need me to like wrap you in a blanket and feed you burritos? Do you need me to draw you out into the world and force you to eat buffalo wings at a competition? Because that's just where we are. Like, and so this is one of those important things where it's like, you set the expectation in that first date of asking better questions so that you're better able to connect with your partner on a long-term basis, because you've both learned better ways to approach things instead of like, I don't know, what do you want to do tonight? And you're the two vultures in Robin Hood, where they're like, well, what do you want to do tonight? I don't know. What do you want to do tonight? I don't know. What do you want to do tonight? And you spend, like, you marry each other in the midst of this conversation, and then until you die, that's the whole, like, that's the rest of your life. Well, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? It's like, what would you like? How would you like to move through this moment? How would you like to experience the next few hours with me? Adventure, excitement, like doing something mundane. And so that's one of the best parts that I really appreciate this is just, like I said, framing conversations so that you have that, so that as you move together, you have better communication, that you can address questions more directly.
And later on, when you're actually in a relationship, how can I support you right now? Is a lovely question. Versus, do you need any support? Right? Which is, I mean, it's basic yes or no questions versus an open ended. So how can I support you right now? Mm-hmm. It really takes them a lot to say there's no way, or they'll tell you something really fun that's, you're like, yeah, totally outside of my realm of, like, I need you to stop this pandemic. Not my area of expertise.
Can you get the smoke to go away? Nope. Well, so that kind of lines up what to do ahead of the date. So you make sure you talk to your partner. You make sure that you're both setting the expectation of what you'd like to experience together for an experience for your first time together, and then you kind of move forward, and one of you can take the forefront, the other can take the forefront. I personally am of the opinion that if I've asked someone to come on a date with me, it is like the responsibility of the date is in my wheelhouse. Like, I'm going to take charge of this. I'll make the decisions. But if you ask me for a second date, it's on you now, baby, because you decided you want to spend time with me, and there's an exchange of emotional labor that should go into dating. But before the date, what would you like? What are your preferences? How can I support you in this moment? Let's set our expectations together. And those are probably the 4 major points ahead of the date. So then, like, when we're actually on the date, things move into a different territory.
And I like to set, my favorite way to set expectations is to set the expectation that there are no expectations, so that there's no pressure. It can go anywhere, but it just depends on how it feels to you both in the connection during the date.
So on the date, how are we supposed to comport ourselves?
Well, I like to comport myself as a gentleman.
I also like to comport myself as a gentleman.
So I've always thought it was funny how guys are like, I don't know how to attract a girl. I'm like, it's really simple, really. And it has nothing to do with looks, by the way. Well, a lot of women have a thing of like, the more attractive the guy is, the less they can trust him. So it's actually more difficult for somebody who's incredibly good looking. They have all these stories about what kind of guy, like he's that kind of guy, or that kind of crap. But if you have your attention on her, be curious about her, and be up to something larger than yourself. It could be, rescuing puppies, or it could be transforming the planet, or, who knows what it is, but have a purpose, have your attention on her, and be curious about her. And all the other, like, general things, be polite, I actually like to watch how people interact with wait staff at a restaurant. To me, it's a huge red flag if somebody's
very telling,
not polite with like their servant or something, or and I probably go too far to the other end. Like, I know I asked for a thing, they screwed it up, and I go, hey, did I ask for, and just to be like, who knows what's going on back of the house, or whatever. But it is very telling how they interact with them. So I just have your attention on them, and that's actually physical attention. Little things like turn do not disturb on your phone. Like, you don't need to be looking at, unless you have children, or you've got some, unless you have children and there's something going on.
You shouldn't be like this.
Right. That's how I know the date's over. Like, I'm like if we're out on a date at a restaurant and that starts happening, I'm like, check please. Like, I'm just, I just haven't. And I don't think that's a generational thing either. I think that's just an attention thing.
And again, short of there being emergency situations, if you have kids that you need to keep an eye on, if you have family that's sick, like if there's some sort of outstanding
a project on fire at work, burning to the ground, no pun intended.
But coming back to the expectation thing, like I have, and in my past shown up and I've been like, I'm so sorry, XYZ is happening. I need this to stay out, but know that short of chaos actually unfolding at my feet, you've got my attention. But I do have to like side eye it on occasion to be like,
yeah,
nope, not chaos, just an Instagram notification. Nope, not chaos, just a TikTok warning. Nope, not chaos.
And I just turn on do not disturb. I mean, if I need to check it all, like because there's a client situation, or say I don't have children, there's a client situation, I'll just go to the bathroom with it and look at it real quick, but not, get lost in there. Just check on that one thing. If there's a client's like, oh my God, I've got this thing going on.
Yeah. So even when you're working on connecting with someone in dire circumstances, it's always okay to say, you know what, I need to just step away for a second because of this thing I expressed to you ahead of time. I need to take a minute. I'm going to go outside, or I'm going to go over here. And once this one emergency is done, I will come right back because you have my attention. I want to reassert to you that I'm very much enjoying what's happening. I want to be a part of this, but I also have this whole life outside of this moment together. And most people I found have been super responsive to that. Like pretty much everybody. Nobody's been like, I'm sorry, your kid is sick. Excuse me.
Priorities.
I'm right here. So that proper framing is really important for the date. Like we talked about ahead of time, like sometimes you walk into a date, even though you think that everything is going to be okay, life happens and that's okay. And it's okay, but you just have to make sure you're communicating properly.
And then as a heteronormative man, asking depth questions. And I used to think it was fun to see if I could get through a date without ever talking about myself, like just ask her questions, but not in a way that she feels interviewed, but just have my attention on her, continue to be curious, and what's important to you in relating, and have even, and sometimes I'll say, by the way, I like to go deep pretty fast. So I might ask some questions that, God damn it.
Might ask some questions that get into territory maybe you weren't necessarily willing to get into on the first date.
Right, and I just say, by the way, I don't think, I don't necessarily, like, to me, it doesn't matter where you went to school or if you have siblings, or what matters to me is this right here, like the quality of the connection. And so I'm going to ask some odd questions, that go deep. Is that okay with you? Just get permission in advance, and then what's important to you relating. What are some of the things that have gone really well in your relationships in the past that you really enjoyed? Do you want more of? What's some of the things that didn't go so well? And like you can actually, and you don't want to. I had to master this sort of soft, soft eyes, because I've gotten the feedback I can be intimidating. So I've had to really soften the way I ask the questions, just so just weave it in. But it could be as simple as, what do you enjoy most about what you do for a living? Or what do you, like, not what do you do, but what do you enjoy most about it? That's what do you really like about it?
So I think something that's important here is that it's also, you need to read the room. And so you need to know who you're talking to. And until you get to actually be in a space with someone, you don't always know, because some people feel very violated when you start asking questions like, what was your childhood like? How do you interact with your parents? What are your hopes and dreams? And they need to talk about more superficial things. And so one of the things as an extension, and we'll get into this, that both of us are available to do is vet questions for you, potentially for your dates. So it's like, how do you have a mix of really personal questions versus kind of more superficial questions where you can still get to know one another through that. You can still have the open-ended questions that you're asking, but you're not just like going intense and you're with someone who just maybe can't handle that or isn't willing to go there with you on a first date.
And some of you may be interested in dating those types of people.
So some people are like really sticky doors, and they need a little WD-40 at the hinges until they're going to open for you, and that's a thing too.
I'm just trying to be funny.
I'm still sticking to my cynic, even though I said be the romantic in that moment. Let's never do that again.
Okay, great. But in general, it took a long time for me to get the questions asked in return, and it always surprised me. But also, it still sort of surprises me. But it is important, and yeah. So
aside from coming in with no expectations, trying to set a good realm of meeting between the two of you, making sure you're not on your phone the whole time, making sure you're asking engaging questions. What else do we need to really think about while we're on that first date?
Well, this goes back to being a gentleman, and you talked about whoever asks. Is one of the things that I think works really well, especially if you've already said it, that there's no expectations, is to handle the check without her knowing it. Like, I've given a waiter my card on the way into the bathroom, so essentially she never even sees the check. So there isn't that weird, awkward moment. There was one time where I was having this horrible, it was just a weird, awkward date with this woman. And it was just drinks. We'd each had 3 drinks. And I was like, I never want to see this woman again. I mean, she was stiff, arrogant the whole time, looking at the rest of the room. So when the check came, I intentionally opened it up in between the two of us. And she went, I've never paid for anything. And I went, well, this would be a good character building exercise for you then.
Which takes us to ways to let your date know at the first date how maybe there's not going to be a second date.
Yeah. And for me, that's really just, this isn't a fit. And if they start to ask you why, just say because it's not a fit. Well, why not? Because it's not a fit. If you give them reasons, they're going to start to try to overcome them, like objections, like, well, but if you knew this about me, or it's like, it's just not a fit. I've only ever had to say it 3 times before they just go, okay. And it's something they teach in it's like a hypnotic language practice. Well, just, or like with a child, why? Just because. Well, why? Well, because. Why? Because, like, they just give up after 3 times. Um, but giving them reasons will give them access points, like they think it's something that they can convince you otherwise of. And it really doesn't matter. Like, it's just not a fit. And then also, like, from my perspective, I almost shared this. So I had this exchange with this woman, and she was going to fly up here to meet me, and she said, I don't think I'm going to. And I said, okay, great, thank you. Like, I didn't ask her why, or it was like, all right, great. Thanks for being clear. Just let it go. And I think a lot of guys are too. I don't know what that is. Like the cleanliness, or to me, it's just a waste of time. Also, but it's never gonna be an effective strategy. Like, that's not a way for her to think. Well, maybe. It's just the most ineffective. Like, now that woman might go, well, maybe, like, she might actually start to second guess herself. Not that was my intentional strategy, but trying to drill into her reasons or asking her why. And we had an amazing connection before that. And I don't know what happened overnight, and it almost doesn't matter to me. But also, in terms of I want to get back to Jet's question before we get to the how to end the date. If you ask those questions and you find out what's important to them in relating, you find out very quickly whether or not it's an initial fit or not. So instead of going on a bunch of hopes and assumptions, and you can just find out really quick. Like, if somebody tells me that family is the most important thing to her, it's probably not a fit. Like, it's if communication, personal development, connection, like these things, that's probably more of a fit. And not that there's anything wrong with family, it just probably means that she's more conventionally minded, and it probably isn't going to, I'm just going to be hell for her, essentially, like later on. And I'll feel like it'll be hell for both of us, actually. And I have ignored these things out of,
Well, and that's something to think about when you're building a list of questions to go into a date with, so that you can, short of, if the person that you're on the date with isn't going to be the kind of person who brings you into their space by asking you questions and trying to get you to engage, and you have to be that person, building a list of questions that kind of either really aggressively or inadvertently root out your core values is a really important thing to do.
They are values. They are values questions.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, well, what do you love? Where do you spend your time? How do you move through life? How do you feel about family? How do you feel about, and so that's one of the things that's really helpful when you're building that list is, okay, what's important to me? How do I ask questions to find out where they are on these same issues? And then how do we move through that discussion?
And you need to know that to be able to have the questions make any sense. Right. You need to know that about yourself first. And, I've had somebody ask, well, what happens if later on in the relationship you found you have a mismatch of values? And I say, well, it means you really fucked up early on. I'm sorry. There's no solution. It's like, well, should I ask, deeper questions? Should have asked, oh my God. I mean, the number of questions I didn't ask before I got married 20 years ago and then divorced 3 years later. A lot of this stuff came out of wanting to avoid the same, marriage and divorce scenario. Like, I had no idea she was a surgeon. Had no idea she wanted to have babies and be a housewife. No clue. Didn't even occur to me that might have been what she wanted. And it really was what she wanted. She wanted to, she wanted to have a drink ready for me when I came home from work, and wanted a white picket fence. And it was like, it didn't make any sense to me that a surgeon would want that. I made all these assumptions. And so out of the wreckage of my divorce, I was like, well, I need to apply these questions to not just do you want children, but what's important to you? And you can chunk up and chunk down with it. If they say, well, hiking is important to me, you can say, well, what's important about hiking? And they might say health, or they might say connecting with nature. Like, you don't know what the thing necessarily means. And so you could still find common ground of like, well, I like to connect to nature too. I like to be on the water, or, you can actually find ways to connect at a higher level if you get out of the concrete. And hiking may not be the thing. It might be connecting with nature, or, it could be that connecting with nature, like I've met people who connecting with nature is their spiritual practice. And there's lots of ways you can do that.
So basically, when you're asking those questions, know why you're asking and know how to get deeper with them if there's a mismatch on the other side of it. That's the best way to kind of build that list.
And so you can use it, by the way, this works in almost any context, looking for a new job, or, looking for a new partner, or a house, or like what's important to you and about all those things. Mm-hmm. So, and in the course, and maybe in the fourth talk, we'll get a little bit into how to actually use that as a way to avoid conflict also in a relationship, but absolutely. A way to effectively communicate your needs so you can get what you want without getting embroiled in this sort of conflict. You can actually, well, here's what's really important to me, and here's how that would show up, or,
so like we'll go deeper into that later. And if any of you have any questions, you can always reach out. But so we've gone through how to set expectations for your first meeting with this new person, how to work through the time that you have together, and how to utilize it in a way that's going to be effective for both of you. But then after that time, once the date is over, there are also some kind of guidance rules for, what to do. Do you wait a week to talk to them? Do you text them immediately? Do you call them 17 times the next day being like, where are you and why are we not doing the thing? There are other rules to follow up, because we've all also made those mistakes where all of a sudden it's like, you've been gone for 5 minutes. Are you home yet? Are you home yet? Are you home yet?
I don't think there's anything wrong. So I don't like to play games. So the whole, like, you need to wait 2 weeks, dude. Like a lot of these things that guys tell guys, like, you're supposed to, I tell them right away, but keep it light. Like, mm-hmm. I had a really great time. I look forward to seeing you again. Or when are you available next? Like, mm-hmm. like low intensity, but like even on the way home, like that. I mean, unless I'm just wiped out, and then sometimes I just need a day of no communication. I'm not peopling, but for the most part, you want to stay engaged and let them know right away. Not always the case, but I don't like to play it cool. But I'm also not like, I want you to have my babies. It's like
yeah, that doesn't work. It doesn't work.
But I had a really great time here. I really enjoyed the way you. How
making sure to point out some specific element from the date, because that's also how you can communicate to the person. I was paying attention. I was there. I was really excited about this. And, if it's, the way that your hair looked, or
thanks for being so vulnerable with those questions I asked.
Exactly. Like whatever it is, but like reach out, acknowledge what happened, talk about why you enjoyed what happened, and then make yourself available. Assuming that's what you want to do. It's also okay to end that conversation with, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for XYZ. I don't think that we're a great fit, but I really appreciate you spending the time with me.
Absolutely.
And so it's okay to go either way. I mean, of course, ideally, once you've moved through the date, you get to that point and it's just like, maybe I want to tell you that I want to have your babies, but I'm not going to be that. I'm going to take a step back and instead break it down with a little bit more casualty. This is what I liked. I appreciate you. I want to spend more time with you, and then just leave it at that, and let the person just kind of experience that extra little step of gratitude, and that extra little bump of flirting, and that extra little, like, I saw this about you and it brought me joy.
But then also wait for a response before you
jump in. Yeah. Again, don't just be like, I like this, and 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 I like this. Just like, cool, that's because making yourself aggressively available like that can also come off uncomfortably for a lot of people.
I can't remember where I saw it. The guy's like, what do you think of these? She's like, where's her response? Like, Oh, it's just like way. It was like the guy had written, pages of like. He's like, I'm not sure what's going on here. I am.
It's because you didn't give me any time to tell you what was going on, sir and or madam.
But
So yeah, like once you've gotten through the date, make sure to acknowledge it, make sure to appreciate the person you've spent time with, and then ask for what you want afterward. Yes, I want to spend time with you. No, thank you. This was great, but I appreciate it.
and also, I know a lot of people who have trouble just blocking people. I've heard also a lot of people get really weird when you tell them it's not a fit. Feel like blocking, don't stay engaged. Feel free to block. Like if I want to date with somebody and it seemed really off and it didn't feel like a fit, unless I thought there was some business opportunity or something we might be engaged somewhere else, and we had also talked about that as a possibility. Just go ahead and block them. Like it's not
It's fine.
it's
It's fine.
your phone is like your phone and your communication devices are for your benefit, not for theirs.
Yeah.
Which is another frame on not using your phone. A lot of people feel compulsively the need to answer your phone no matter what, or answer a text. Your phone is for your convenience, not for whoever's texting you. Just so that you know, like during a date. I just wanted to cover that.
The one caveat to that being, and I think any lady who's ever been on a date, I know when I go on a date with someone for the first time, there are at least 3 people who know where I am, who know who I'm talking to, and know the time frame that I'm expecting of the date. And so if the date gets to a point where we've gotten past that, I make sure to check in with my people, because I also make sure that the people keeping an eye on me and where I am are also the people who would either show up with weapons and just murder the fuck out of somebody, or call the cops and go around the legal way, depending on what their time frame and availability is. But that's something, and that makes it easier.
We don't cover murder in the course, by the way. It's not part of the curriculum.
Yet, but if you guys need some advice, you know how to get a hold of me. But no, I'm kidding. But one of the things that is the exception to being on your phone is making sure you're safe, and that's coming back to the idea of blocking people. And so it's like you've had people who you've talked to, like, hey, I'm going to be here with this person for this amount of time. Please make sure I'm okay, because as female humans, primarily, we have to put eyeballs on that a lot. And so that's the caveat. Check in with your people during the date if necessary. But because of that, it's also okay to tell your person where it's like, this date went like this, and then it ended like this, and now I feel unsafe, so I'm going to block them.
Yeah.
And if you're investing in the right people to help keep an eye on you, they will be also the first to be like, yeah, no, block them. You don't need that. I love you. I care about you. I know that you're in a vulnerable place because you went on this weird date, which sometimes makes our hearts feel funny. So having a friend you care about, who cares about you, support that about you. Yes, this was not the right thing for you. Please feel like, let me just externally justify your actions. Block them. Yeah, there's no reason. You don't owe anybody anything. So that's just another good way that I've found to reinforce that for me, because I've definitely had moments where I was like, but I mean, should I don't know. What about this? It's like, no, girl, block. If you don't do it, I'm going to drive to your house right now and block them for you. And it's like, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's all I needed. Okay, blocked. Okay, great, got it. So that's another thing to keep in mind, making sure you have somebody keeping eyes on you on the date so they can help be your hype person at the end of it if necessary. But I think that kind of covers everything that we have for tonight.
Questions from anybody, or something that you're curious about in terms of the material that we covered? Setting expectations before the date, making sure that you ask depth questions, find out whether it's a fit during the date, a couple of tips about attention and curiosity, and then how to kind of close it out, mm-hmm. Say whether it's a fit or not a fit, and then also what to do, afterwards. And if you need to ask for support to take care of yourself, yep. And if it's Absolutely. Not a fit. Any questions about any of that stuff that we covered? Cool. Well, we have this conference coming up. It'll be in Seattle, but are we going to have a distance? Well, so pandemic willing, it'll be in Seattle. It may be online. We're not sure how that's going to go in November. It's November 13th, the evening of November 13th, November 14th, November 15th, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We'll have more details that will drop into the event page for tonight.
Yep. Absolutely.
The next one of these we have is, so we have a few topics coming up. One is on just agreements for healthy relating as you move into, say, a second date. Although I actually drop those agreements on before a first date because I just don't want to. I do a bunch of stuff before a first date I wouldn't necessarily recommend somebody does because I don't want to. I'm like, if they can't handle this, then forget it, you know.
And so we'll cover some of those and how to navigate that for yourself.
And you know, it's important to have pacing. So bringing them up on a first date, if it's going incredibly well, might work, but really it's a second date conversation or before a second date conversation. But they are agreements, you know, a framework for healthy relating, clean, healthy relating. And then we'll do one on conflict resolution, how to move through them cleanly and quickly.
Yep.
And have everybody like not step over stuff, but how to actually address it in a clean way.
Yep.
And then boundaries and resentments and or guilt and shame somewhere in there, giving and receiving. So we're going to have 3 more of these.
And then all of those are going to be topics that we go into in a substantially more depth at the workshop that we're doing in November.
Right. This is a tease on, you know, we'll spend several hours on how to rock a first date.
Right.
On Saturday morning, I think, on the workshop. Okay. Well, if there's no questions, thank you for your time. It's been an honor to, I know you have a lot of ways you can spend your time and your energy, so thank you for putting your attention here.
And if you do have questions, you can drop them into the event page and we can keep an eye on it for the next day or two to address them. So if something comes up later, we will happily bring that up too. And that's great.
Oh, and we'll have an affiliate program for the weekend workshop. So
yes,
we can talk about, if you want to make money by referring people to the course, once we have it, we'll have the curriculum up in a few days. Then we can have a conversation about that as well if you're interested in that.
Yeah. So thanks for coming.
Have a great night. Be safe, be happy.